After French President Macron's statement, a Russian senator warned that if NATO sent troops to Ukraine, this could be seen as a declaration of war against Moscow. This military bloc is also preparing for the prospect of confrontation with Russia. After chairing a meeting of 25 European leaders on February 26 in Paris, French President Emmanuel Macron said that there was no consensus on sending troops into Ukraine. However, Mr. Macron also emphasized, nothing should be ruled out. We will do everything necessary to ensure that Russia cannot win the conflict in Ukraine. Up to this point, NATO has been limited to supporting the training of Ukrainian soldiers and providing Kyiv with defensive weapons. NATO member countries are concerned that direct confrontation with Russian troops in Ukraine will lead to the risk of serious escalation. The US-led military bloc is also conducting Steadfast Defender, the largest military exercise since the Cold War, taking place from January to May 2024, with the participation of 31 member countries. Steadfast Defender 2024 will be a clear demonstration of NATO's solidarity and strength to protect member countries, the bloc's values and the international order, said General Christopher Cavalli, a commander at NATO, declare. A notable aspect of the exercise is the presence of US and Canadian troops. That serves both as a reassurance to NATO allies in Europe and as a demonstration that NATO can send large forces to the battlefield. Exercises are generally seen as part of deterrence operations. NATO's exercise Steadfast Defender 2024 simulates a conflict scenario with a near-peer adversary. According to The Conversation, peer competitor here refers to Russia. This shows that NATO is starting to take seriously the risk of direct confrontation with Moscow. Solidarity at the right time? According to The Conversation, demonstrating NATO's solidarity and military capacity is important after 2 years of disagreement among its members over how to respond to the conflict in Ukraine and in the context of controversy over weapons supplies from Western allies to Ukraine. Demonstrating NATO's solidarity and military capacity has become even more important to the bloc after recent statements by former U.S. President Donald Trump that NATO members do not meet the principles pepper will not be protected by the U.S. NATO member countries must spend at least 2% of their annual GDP on defense to ensure the bloc's combat readiness. The reality is much more complicated. Some NATO member countries in Western Europe such as Germany or France, with large populations and farther from Russia, do not tend to increase defense spending according to NATO's goals like countries in Eastern Europe. Therefore, The Conversation believes that relying on the percentage of defense spending to evaluate the value of NATO membership is inappropriate. Is NATO ready for confrontation? The important provision in the treaty establishing NATO is Article 5, controlling collective security and forcing members of the bloc to react if a member of the bloc is attacked by a hostile country, not a member of the bloc. The United States is the only member state to use Article 5, the NATO treaty, after the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Washington has received support from NATO allies in Afghanistan and the war on terror. However, a key problem facing NATO is not the deployment of its troops, but the provision of equipment for them over the long term. The clearest example is in the conflict in Ukraine. NATO has neither stockpiles nor massive production capacity to provide weapons and equipment for a modern, protracted conflict. According to The Conversation, this is because NATO has long planned for what it calls a comfortable war, meaning it can only fight while it has enough weapons, equipment, and supplies. Therefore, in the event of a conflict, NATO will resolve the conflict as quickly as possible. We need large volumes. But the sufficient economy that NATO built together over 30 years is not suitable in case of war, said Admiral Rob Bauer, of the Dutch Navy and a military advisor of NATO, speaking at the Warsaw Security Forum, Poland, in October 2023.